Well, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of our video blog, all things having to do with upper extremities, shoulders, and anything else in the medical community. And today we have a very interesting guest, Joanne Donoghue, who is an associate professor and director of clinical research at an osteopathic college in New York. And Joanne, why don't you give all the appropriate technical definitions there so I don't trip over it.
So my name's Joanne Donoghue. I do publish under DeFrancisco Donoghue, if anybody was searching. I'm the Director of Clinical Research at New York Tech Medical School, College of Osteopathic Medicine, and I'm also an associate professor. My background is in nutrition and exercise physiology.
Well, that's a rather abbreviated encapsulation of what anyone who will follow that link will see. I just want to point out some other interesting things. But first, let me say, here at RangeMaster, we're known that for shoulder pulley exercise and things related that have to do with patients that are recovering from shoulder surgery or trying to avoid it. You can't be talking in that area very long without talking about medical exercise, without talking about posture, without talking about all the various contributions to how did people get in this bad situation and what can they do to not just rehabilitate, but to make long-term life changes. And so that's why we like to talk to people outside our specific scope. And Joanne came into our kind of awareness because lately she's been publishing and speaking about esports. These are the video game competitors that are aspiring to be professional players and earn 6- and 7-figure incomes. And you introduced an interesting title at a recent conference. You talked about esports. Where does the medical community fit in? And so I wonder if you could just tell us how you got there. Is somebody in your family do esports? Because you're a triathlete.
So yeah, my background is I am a marathon runner. I am a triathlete. I've done Ironmans. My research predominantly was either in Parkinson's disease or in female runners. So how did I get involved? 3 years ago, funny enough, my vice president said to me, we have an esports team that's developing on campus. We'd like you to get involved and help out. I had no idea what esports was. I'm not a video game player. When I looked into it, I had the same reaction that a lot of people in rehab and fitness think. I said, I can't believe that they have competitive video gaming. I can't believe that it's even got the word sport in it. I had the same reaction that a lot of people have in the fitness industry. So I met with the team and I started researching it more and I looked into it a little bit more and I was actually blown away at the field. I was really amazed at what it entails, how large it is, and the need for this field to be involved in it. So the one statistic that really shocked me was the final match of one of the video games is called League of Legends. That's one of the competitive games that they play for people who don't know video games. And the final of League of Legends had more viewers than the World Series had. Or
right.
Yeah. So, and that's what I started looking into it more and I started realizing, and I realized that these athletes are typically 10 to 12 years younger than professional athletes in any other sport. So they're very young and they're at a very difficult age to do preventative medicine because they're, nobody's thinking about preventative medicine in their teens or 20s. And their average retirement age is 26 years old from injury.
From injury?
From injury, from musculoskeletal injury.
And what might those injuries be?
So when we looked into it and we did a research study on collegiate athletes, predominantly it's wrist, arm, and shoulder. they do suffer acutely from something called digital eye fatigue, which blurs them. But that's not something that's career ending. What's career ending is their wrist injuries, their finger injuries. They do something called action moves per second. And if you take your finger and go like that with it, they could do up to 100 moves per second with that finger. It's really quite alarming how fast they move. They have really tremendous ability.
100 moves per second.
They can they call them action moves per second. They could do 30 to 60 per second, but then they go up to, like, when they're getting competitive, it can get as high as at the pro level. And if you look at the pros, their IQs are actually on par with grandmaster chess players.
No kidding.
Yeah. So there's a lot more to it than what meets the eye. I think everybody just assumes, they think of the typical teenage kid or younger kid sitting in the basement with a video game in their hand. And it really is quite different than that.
It is different than that. But nevertheless, aren't they spending a lot of time in a chair with a mouse and a keyboard?
A tremendous amount of time, a tremendous amount. And that's where that's where we come into play, the health field. So the average player can play 3 to 4 hours a day without taking a break. So that's sitting sedentary 3 to 4 hours a day in a high stress situation. This isn't just office work where you're sitting behind a computer. They're actually, when you look at some of the research out there, their heart rates are changing from stress, from cortisol levels, not the same way that they raise from exercise. And that's a very big misconception in the field. You might see some articles that are misleading that say, well, heart rate fluctuates during playing this, and that's good because we're raising our heart rate like we would with exercise. Completely two different systems. Anybody in the health field, it seems very obvious to us, but for someone who doesn't understand the human body, they don't understand that. And that I tell them it's equivalent to if you're being scared constantly, that's stress. If someone jumps behind you and you jump up and your heart rate goes up, that's epinephrine, that's a catechol, that's an on response. That's not the same response you get from exercise where your heart rate goes up because you're increasing blood flow and supply to the muscles. Very, very different.
Yeah.
And that is something that I try to get across to a younger population. And also I think it's the responsibility of the research field to make that clear.
Now, I haven't ever played a video game either, but as I've heard it described, people are trying to stay alive in these environments, and they're shooting other people, and they're running and hiding and shooting and twists and turns and things. And do they even have the capability of stepping out of the game and taking a break without losing their place, if you will?
So yes and no. I always equate it to like maybe a basketball game or a soccer game. Some of these games can last 20 minutes. Some can last 45 minutes. If you step away, you can lose your place to get back into a game. But you can take a break. And we're not talking about, I like to separate it out to people who do regular exercise and taking a break from gaming. It's very different. So if you could exercise, let's just say you're doing 30 minutes of exercise a day, and then you go game and sit for 4 hours. That's not enough to negate that sitting for 4 hours. They need to take those breaks. And we actually just showed that a 6-minute walking break made a difference in their executive function. It improved their executive function, taking a 6-minute walking break, as opposed to a 6-minute break of just lying down and doing nothing. That was a really exciting finding that we had. Another finding that this is something I try to get across, that I think health professionals understand, but the world of technology doesn't, is that we looked at body composition in these players who sit for so long. Because what happens, your muscles atrophy. You have no core muscle to support your body to sit that long. And now you're asking your shoulder and your arm to do these constant repetitive overuse motions. And although their body mass index was normal, even compared to healthy controls, body mass index is just looking at their height, and it's just looking at their weight. It's not looking at how much muscle you have, how much fat you have. When we evaluated that using a DEXA scan, we found that our players, although they had the same BMI, they had significantly higher body fat and to me, what's more important is they had significantly lower lean body mass. So they had significantly less muscle mass than healthy controls, their same age match controls. And I think that says a lot for the musculoskeletal injuries that we're also seeing in the population.
Well, before we proceed farther there, in looking at your work, you were already kind of participating in the digital transformation. You have done studies related to Parkinson's and wearables, and kind of the effects of people getting that feedback with wearables. So what did you start to see or think or feel about that with that correlation? Because that's an interesting kind of a mashup there between people that are in a total digital environment, and yet you've got a background that looks at what's going on with them biologically through digital monitoring. What are you saying? What are you seeing?
Well, the digital monitoring, it's funny with esports, the ones that I've been involved with the medical school, we use wrist-worn activity trackers. Those are not very effective when it comes to esport players, because again, I was talking about the action moves per minute. Their wrist is constantly moving. You get a lot of false readings. So it's not the most appropriate way to track it. We did put smartwear on them and had them play with smartwear. We used that collected heart rate, and we looked at breathing rate and sweat rate. I think that the wearables are really the way to monitor this population, to really get a good look at what's going on while they're playing.
So tell me a little bit about smartwear. That's a term that I'm making up an answer in my mind, but if you've used it in research, tell me about that.
It's basically collecting the same data that you would in a watch. It's form-fitting neoprene where that's collecting data. It can actually, it's a heart rate sensor. It looks at your breathing rate. It looks at your sweat rate, temperature. A lot of athletes use it, like they'll use it for research, like they use it in football players and lacrosse players out on the field to see where their heart rate's going as they're playing. It actually is beneficial for this population. And because one thing is, they're not as active as someone out on a field playing. So it actually records much smoother. So you get really nice data, and it's easy, it's lightweight, they don't know they're wearing it, and it doesn't interfere with their gameplay. And it just helps us to understand what exactly is happening physiologically to them with the stress level of their gaming and playing.
Got it. Well, now let's get to the hard question. How do you get inside the minds of these, say, 12 to 25-year-olds and get a behavioral change so they're not setting themselves up for later in life problems, which later in life to them is 25, 26, did you say? Yeah. So what are you finding?
That's the $1 million question. The way I figured, and this is probably the direction that a lot of my research is going now, is performance. The only way to get through to any player is, how can we improve your health while improving your performance, improving your gaming? So if I can convince a 20-year-old to do something, and I could tell him, you'll be able to play 20 minutes longer, or you'll be moving this much faster if you do this. That's what they care about. They care about what's going to make them more competitive. So that's why our last study, we said, okay, we looked at a 6-minute walk, very simple, 6-minute low-level walk compared to just resting, because a lot of times they'll take a break, but they'll go lay on the couch and take a break.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we're like, how can we teach them not to do that? Well, we just showed that 6 minutes of walking improved executive function and made them faster. They made better decisions gaming when they came back to it. And we actually, when we looked at the other data, we actually asked them what they preferred. They actually did prefer the walking break. They said it made them feel more alert when they came back to the game. So I think we have to look at ways of what is going to make them perform better.
Where have you published that? Could you, or is it still in the process of
That's actually under review right now in British Journal of Sports Medicine. I will certainly send it out if it gets out there. And we're actually presenting that also at the International Esports Conference in Paris in December.
And in Paris in December. You're going to Paris in December?
No, it's virtual. I'll be presenting from my basement to Paris.
I did see that Europe is opening up travel if you're fully vaccinated.
Oh, well, let's keep our fingers. I am vaccinated. Let's keep our
Yeah.
fingers crossed. I am vaccinated, so maybe they'll let me go.
Oh, I think that'd be fascinating, and just that whole concept because of the growing size of this population. So there's the 20-minute walk, but I also noted you have a background in nutrition. So could you explain a little bit about your background, and then let's talk nutrition for these esports players.
So my bachelor's is in nutrition and my doctorate is in holistic nutrition, which is more alternative nutrition. Very big topic with esports. Again, somebody might be saying, what kind of nutrition do you need? You're sitting behind a computer. It's not as if you're exhausting all your glycogen stores while you're sitting there and playing, but the brain utilizes a lot of glucose when you're actually working. You know, some people might think and I know it happens to me, when you're working all day, sometimes behind the computer, you might be starving when you get up and you're like, why am I so hungry? I wasn't moving. Your brain uses a lot of glucose and glycogen. Their nutrition habits are poor because for many reasons. One, they simply forget to eat. They're caught up in the game.
Mm-hmm.
They don't drink. And sometimes the reason they don't hydrate themselves is because they don't want to get up and take a break and have to use the bathroom. I always recommend make sure you drink because it will force you to get up and take a break. Because once you get up, and this was a study that was done actually a few years ago by an author named Smuck, and once in motion, you stay in motion for at least, they say, about 15 minutes. So hopefully, I always tell them the little trick is if you have to get up and use the bathroom, you might get up and do a few more other things and stay active.
Right.
So,
right.
And there are a lot of false advertising right now with esports. Everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon and say, hey, this is going to make you perform better. Are we using caffeine, Ritalin, things like that to help keep you awake and alert? I can tell you that there's just no data on it. There, you know, it's so in the infant stages. There is no research on it. If any company is claiming something, they're claiming it probably from another population, not from esports.
Yeah, yeah. Probably some of your basic nutrition elements are right, though. I mean, as you talked about body fat content, you certainly probably wouldn't want to be contributing to the body fat, although that's an area of some controversies too. You know, is body fat an accumulation of unused carbohydrate, or what, you know, what really is going to create that elevated body fat besides their sedentary activity? Any thoughts there on what you'd like to see them eat?
I mean, the one thing that I try to stress to the players going back to their glucose is, you know, low glucose reduces your cognitive ability. So it is important to eat properly and almost pre-game nutrition, the way we do it with regular athletes. Athletes use pre-game nutrition.
Yeah.
I think it gets tricky with what you just said. Is there a correlation between being overweight and your performance in gaming? And quite honestly, there might not be. So the only thing that we can maybe correlate is that being overweight with low muscle mass is going to really impact on your musculoskeletal injuries. And
Okay.
that's where the shoulder, the wrist, the arm comes into play, like that you need those muscle. It's not just, I think, especially with this age group, and it's with any athlete, it's hard to make that correlation that you need to build up a muscle in your wrist and your shoulder to perform better.
Yeah.
You know, but I also put that on the coach. That's why you have coaches. That's why you have trainers and coaches to make sure that you're following these protocols.
Well, you said at the outset, you know, we talked about your presentation on where does the medical community fit in, and you just touched on it. Some of these, like your college there, ask you to be engaged, and so other than a walk, what are you having these athletes do?
Well, you know, we have exercise programs for them. We tell them, okay, you know, we have people will say you need to do at least the minimum of, you know, 30 minutes a day of some sort of exercise and movement and training them. Because of COVID, obviously, nobody is in person anymore. So you could only hope you send people training programs and they follow them. And this isn't new to esports. You know, every collegiate team faces this. They have athletes go home for the summer and they're supposed to follow a program before they come back and be in shape. And again, you're dealing with a young population, and unless you're really watching over them, are they really following through with it? I think that, and again, one thing I do want to make a side note of, there is a tremendous difference between collegiate level esports and professional esports. And right now, the research, we're trying to like differentiate that, because I tell people it's as if you're researching the Dallas Cowboys and a high school football team. It's a tremendous difference. You can't, it's comparing apples and oranges. So if you're going to do research on professionals, do research on professionals, which is under 1% of the population.
Yes.
I really think the main focus now is you're looking at so many younger kids playing video games that don't even have to be competitive, that you're going to see these overuse injuries, and they don't have a coach looking over them. They don't have the means of professionals. And I think the big challenge is, how do you get it out to the parents and to other like that, to look for signs of overuse injuries and not being physically active? And for that, I call out the manufacturers of these games, because they're the ones who have the contact with them, and they have the means to reach out and say, hey, time to take a break or do something
Right.
for them.
Right. Very, very interesting. Well, you said the P word there. So you talked about what role does the medical community play, but what about parents? I mean, if you could say something to parents, I'm already wishing you were on Good Morning America.
If I could say something to parents.
Yeah.
Now,
say something
listen,
to parents.
I am a triathlete. I am one of those parents who said I'd never have video games in my house. I am always on my kids. But I realize in today's day and age, video games are not going anywhere, and it's their social life. It's how they socialize with each other now. Very different than how we grew up. You know, they communicate, and there's so much negative tone to that. But believe it or not, during COVID, we did an international study on this, and if you look at the research, it actually was very positive, because it was a way of communicating and actually socializing for a lot of younger people. Was through video gaming. And for parents, I would say, be aware. My kid, you know, I drove it into my kids. Yes, you can sit and play these games. What are you doing for your physical body before that? You know, get up and take a break, take care of your body, everything in moderation.
Yep. Did we see a spike in video game play time during the pandemic?
Tremendously, yeah, tremendous spike in video game during the pandemic.
Wow.
And interestingly enough, and again, we're putting this out. We did a study. We put it out in 6 languages. Not only did we see a spike in video game and competitive gamers and recreational gamers, but we saw in that population a decrease in stress, improved mood, and increase in activity. They actually did better.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So I think you're going to see. So I think the pandemic was almost one of the best things that could have happened to the esport industry, because it was an outlet for people.
Well, as a parent now, my children are young adults now, but so we get together and they're talking about what their score is in some game, and these are 20 and 30-year-olds that are still, you know, I have a chef, and I have and one of my sons, and his main source of conversation with his older brother, who is an economist, is how they're doing on some Mario Kart game. You know, what's their latest competitive score? And it's just fascinating to me that that's their touch point. You know, that's where they start their
bonding. They bond over. Yeah.
And
so, I, for the record, you know, I am awful at these games. I don't know how to play. I always tell people I could play Pac-Man, and that's it. It takes tremendous skill to play some of these games, and it's and when I say where does the athletic world fit in with this, I think it's beautiful to come from our background, because we are coming from an outside perspective of where they're coming from, you know, and I do I do see the negative tone that comes from certain organizations like ACSM and when they kind of roll their eyes and poo-poo the whole idea of esports. And I'm like, you know, as health professionals, it's not our job to judge what people are doing. We're here to improve people's performance and keep them healthy. You know, I never get into the argument with people of should it be a sport? Are they athletes? I don't. That's not my decision to make. My job is to make them healthier and perform better. And
Wow, that's a, you've taken an elevated position. It's so easy from a parental standpoint to say, you shouldn't be doing this, you should be doing this,
right.
you know, and that sets up that conflict that probably isn't helpful, you know, in trying to promote overall health, you know. Very interesting. Hey, I want to talk to you just a little bit about um, your training for triathlons, the Ironman. Kind of fascinating. I watched the video that you did with the Hospital for Special Surgery.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my commercial. I was the spokesperson for the hospital special surgery. Yes.
Yeah. So you alluded to the fact that you were a college athlete. What did you do in college?
Soccer. I was a soccer player.
And that's
I
when
was soccer and volleyball, but I predominantly went to college for soccer.
I see. And did you know at that time you were wanting to be a healthcare professional?
Yes, I did. I actually, I knew I wanted something with nutrition actually at that point in college. I didn't want to go into rehabilitation until after I had my first knee surgery and saw what it did for me. And that changed my mind. I said, you know, when you're an athlete and you're injured and you don't think you can do what you can do anymore, and you have these therapists getting you back doing that, I saw what it did for me, and that changed my mind completely.
Was your injury a torn ACL at that point?
Yeah, so this was way back. I tore my ACL, severed that and my meniscus, and not a lot of places were doing what they call arthroscopic means of fixing it at the time. They were opening you up and doing it. So I actually found HSS to be the one place that actually did that. And I wasn't able to get back the way I wanted to back then. I did eventually find my outlet in running and triathlons after that.
And then you irritated that knee, some 20 years later, and come to find out you had a pretty beat up meniscus.
I did. I have a pretty good knee. I mean, I was born with a congenital hip issue, and that kind of affected my knee. So I've had 7 knee surgeries, a hip surgery there. I've had a lot of surgeries, and you know what? I tell people, like, it's minor compared to what I've worked with. You know, I work with people with neurological disorders. You work with people who have such severe injuries, and if you get broke, fix it. And you know, I try to rehabilitate as much as I can. And I never take movement or exercise for granted.
I enjoyed your comment where you said, we don't fix the car so we can park it in the garage. We fix the car so we can continue using it.
Absolutely. The comments, I still get the comments with people like, how many more surgeries are you going to have? When are you going to stop running? Why would I fix myself to sit? You fix yourself. Yeah, if your car breaks down, you fix it, not to sit in the driveway. You fix it so you could keep driving it. So I'll continue to do what I have to do what I, to run and to stay active.
Yeah, that's what a great outlook. Thank you very much. Well, listen, 20 other things we could talk about, but this has been a fascinating conversation, and I hope our viewers enjoy it. Let's go again, Joanne, if you could tell folks how to contact you, where your publications are, kind of just slow down and tell people how to find you.
So I think the best way to see my publications would probably be on my website. You could just Google my name, Joanne Donoghue, for my website. I could also send it an email. My email is jdonoghue@nyit.edu. You could just go on the New York Institute of Technology website and Google my name and find my name there. And I'm on Twitter, Joanne Donoghue 4 is my Twitter feed. And I do post things on not just esports, I post things with athletes, runners. I do have an obsession with the running world, so I always post things, little tips on there.
Okay.
And And LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn also. You could just Google my name on there.
Right. Well, thank you for joining us today. And that'll conclude our interview, but hang around for a minute. I got a couple of more questions.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, you bet.